Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. C'est le CyberDudes podcast, your favorite English language CyberDudes, cybersecurity news podcast. And despite the French introduction, we will be conducting the rest of this in English because Omar, I don't know what's your proficiency on the Franco side of.
It's after Waterloo, I lost interest in that entire part of the world.
So did we.
Yeah, honestly, for a little bit.
No, it was after Brexit we lost
interest.
Yes. But yes, for reasons of mutual proficiency in the French language, we will be continuing this in English now. What kind of a week has it been for us, Omar? Been busy, or has it been on the quiet side?
Yeah, personal life's been a bit busy. Baby sick, so that's always just the sniffles and whatnot. And anyone who has kid under 1 or under 2,
It also means you're going to be ill for about the next 10 years, perpetually.
Yeah, pretty much. It's Chris is probably going to grab it first. She's a little bit more proximal to the baby, but I can already tell. Like, I'm just trying to get a lot of sleep to fight it, doing vitamin C, zinc, the emergency stuff that the teachers use. But it's going to hit me probably like Wednesday. How about you?
No, it's just I don't even know. I've been trying to build a workbench for my table saw so that it actually lines up with my actual workbench rather than kind of clashing, so that I can push pieces off and then not have them fall off the end of the
Okay, that's pretty cool.
That's been a bit of a challenge. It's slightly tried to do a halfway between just standard fixings like screws and joinery, sort of like a hybrid between the two, and it's come out like slightly like wonky.
Gotcha.
So I will need to put some bracing in there and like stiffen it up so it is actually square.
That's what
and
you
not
need.
sort of 3D parallelogram.
But I'm working in your basement.
I'm working with like Home Depot timber, so it's you get lengths of 2x4, but you end up with hockey sticks.
Yeah.
Cyber-wise, what kind of a week does it appear to have been? I see we have a few stories on the docket.
This is we're starting off with a bang. I don't know if it's related to what's going to happen at the end of the month. I'll leave that for the more erudite among our listeners, or if you want to leave a little comment and let us know what y'all think there. But we're going to start out with an absolute banger. Good old Myanmar forces a new cybersecurity law, and VPN usage is the main target. Now, a TLDR that I'm going to do horrific disservice to the geopolitics of the region. Myanmar hasn't been really playing nice with a lot of its people. They've been having a lot of unrest, both inside of its borders as well as with its neighbors. Now, chicken and egg scenario there again, right? I didn't read that at Oxford, so I'll just stick to the cyber. But the thing that jumps out at me here is there was a similar law, or it's still kind of rolling around in your homeland there, Robin. And there's always some jabronis on the U.S. side that figure, giving back doors and dissuading the usage of secure internet might be a good idea just for safety and security, right? Although Salt Typhoon would like a word on the U.S. side of that conversation. But essentially, I like kicking off our 2025 coverage with a story that this is not just a cyber issue. It's not just some nerds in lab coats and glasses. This can affect your personal civil rights. This is, prime Electronic Frontier Foundation fodder for a good reason. Shout out to my friends at the EFF there. And it's troubling when you have folks that are not erudite or versed in cyber trying to regulate it.
Yeah,
scary.
I mean, the crux of this is they're trying to clamp down on VPN usage, basically make it so that people it's a criminal offense to use a VPN service without approval. And I think largely this looks like a make sure that we know what everybody is doing on the internet, so that if they do something that makes them persona non grata, then they can be persona non alive anymore. Which obviously that's not good for individual or societal kind of liberty. I do think it's one of those things where if ever we're hearing, because governments like keeping tabs on their people, as we've seen quite
everywhere
extensively over Christ knows how long. But the thing that really hits me on this one is whenever you get people, say for instance here in the States, screeching about tyranny, saying you can still use your VPN, you can still make yourself anonymous on the internet if you want to. Real tyranny is when you no longer have that option because the government has removed it from you.
Or will hunt you down, as you said. If you try, they'll find you and detain you at the very least, or disappear you at the very worst.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
Yes. Tyranny is not rainbows on products at Walmart. It is not being, it's fearing for your life if you say what the government doesn't want you to.
Yeah, I think the entire Middle East would like a word in that conversation, because the availability of VPNs and the availability of freer internet in that area facilitated the types of uprisings and civic unrest that happened there. And then now there's a lot of countries that are clamping down on that already just off the rip, right? Mm-hmm. Which you just can't, there's not even the option of a non-regulated or non-surveilled access to the internet, much less a VPN. So governments learn that the hard way, and I think Myanmar is taking a very bad lesson from the other nations and nation states. So, tying that one off, because we like to start on the high notes here at the CyberDudes podcast. Apparently, going right into another one where there's some tricky wickets here. U.S. sanctions Beijing-based cyber group for its alleged role in hacking incidents. This is brought to us by the fine folks at the Associated Press. I'm going to pause. And for our just straight listeners, I'm doing my surprise face. This is the only thing that for me that's surprising about this is that it's not directly Sol Typhoon. It's another situation where it's a different typhoon. It's a different flavor of typhoon. Too many typhoons. I don't like this type of ice cream. But what's novel here, and I think newsworthy and of note, is that the U.S. is sanctioning some of the extended apparatus that supports the hacking infrastructure in China. So it's not straight up like, hey, Chinese Communist Party, don't hack us. It's all these supposed independent, and I'm using air quotes here again for our listeners, entities that are essentially vassals or cutouts for the CCP that aid in facilitating this type of illegal surveillance.
Yeah,
that is intriguing to me.
Yeah, I mean, it does make me think kind of, okay, yes, you can sanction them, but what's it really gonna do to stop them? It's kind of, it's one of those things that's like, oh yes, if you do leave the country, or if you do try and do anything outside of China, then you're going to have real problems. But as long as they stay within the Chinese borders, then it is slightly toothless sort of measure. But I mean, what else really can you do? What another foreign, what another sovereign state does within their own borders, I guess unless they have lots of oil, is largely their business. And it takes an awful lot of oil to go marching in there uninvited.
That's a nice caveat, by the way. I caught that and it made me chuckle, because that is absolutely a game changer at that point.
It takes the former CEO of Halliburton in the White House to go marching into other countries. I'm amazed Venezuela's not been marched into yet, quite frankly.
Well, I think it's just a healthy fear of Venezuelans, which I share and I espouse. They're not to be trifled with. With every bit of respect, Venezuelans are tough, right? They broke no nonsense. I'm just reminded of that scene from Me, Myself, and Irene. What are you doing? I'm kicking my own ass. Do you mind? I think it's just generally that's the mental image I have of that entire area.
I don't think I've seen that film enough times to recall that reference. But...
Oh man, it's It's Jim Carrey in a bathroom whooping his own ass. And that's essentially what so, but moving on, because I don't want that ass whooping to come our way.
No.
You see, now I got it from something called the Cobb County Courier. It's also in the Iowa State University Press, or the Conversation. But essentially, the lesson here: selling fear, marketing for cybersecurity products often leaves consumers less secure. I think we could trot out my surprise face again for a part 2. Yep. This has been, if you've heard us talk about FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. If you talk to any sort of credible or reputable cyber professional, they will curl their lip in disdain at the use of such tactics. But salespeople have absolutely no moral compass. And as a reformed salesperson, I can attest to that fact. I'm glad that I've been in a program for the last 10, 11 years to actually have some slight scruples. They'll do anything to sell. And one of the things that's a primary driver is going to be fear. But in this case, what this story brings out is that fear will drive you into potentially worse solutions than when you started.
And I think that's one of those things where we encounter, again, our good friend Daniel Kahneman with thinking fast and slow, system 1, system 2, thinking, fight or flight, act without thinking, self-preservation. Let's just go and buy. And organizations have this problem multiple fold in that buy more technology, buy more things, more widgets, and we will be more secure. And it just doesn't necessarily track, because a lot of the time these folks will have seen this countless times, buy something that they think solves their issue without actually understanding what their root issue is. And ultimately then they end up spending potentially millions of dollars on a solution that does not fix their underlying problem, because they never knew what it was in the first place. Same sort of thing can happen with end consumers. You don't fully understand the landscape or the problem, the solution, or not the solution, the situation that you were in. You are led down a path of, if you don't do this, a bad thing will happen, and you want to avoid the bad thing happening. And so there's plenty of stuff that I think the key one with this is always when it comes down to antivirus, for example. Like, yes, it used to be necessary, 10 years ago or so, but you will see the likes of Norton, McAfee, Avast these days hawking security software that really is not necessary for the end consumer anymore. And
dark web protection. What do you mean? You mean my mother doesn't need dark web monitoring and protection on a daily basis?
I know. And that's it. Those kinds of things, like, I think there is value in that sort of service, but only once you have dealt with a bunch of other stuff first. When I talk about the things that are real, genuine garbage that just isn't necessary anymore, it is the antivirus software, because for the most part, inbuilt Chromebook security will do you for if you're using one of those. Apple's security suite will keep your Mac and your iPad and whatever else secure. Windows Defender, as you mentioned, for PCs, does the bulk of what you need it to do, and then everything else, as our good friend Andy said several months ago, you can cover off 95% of your cyber risk by doing simple, good cyber hygiene, practicing good cyber hygiene habits. And to go down the rabbit hole of dark web monitoring and all of that sort of stuff is kind of putting the cart before the horse. You really want to be doing your foundational stuff first before you start tying in a fancy sound system to your shack that can blow over in a stiff breeze.
I'm laughing because that was my father, just straight up, like, with his shitbox car and the staples in the felt, right? But he always had a banging radio,
banging sound system, yeah,
banging radio, like that thing. You could hear the the folk music, the South American folk music from 2 blocks away, and then you would see what would roll up, and it's like, how is this thing moving? This is incredible. It's probably carried on the waves of the sonic,
I was going to say, would would you not get into a certain situation where certain songs that you can't play for the resonant frequency would destroy the car?
Listen,
like that
yeah.
thing from last year or year before, where if you certain brands of Lenovo laptop, if you play a certain Diana Ross song at them, you can destroy the hard, you can blow up the hard drive.
Listen,
such a niche attack, but it's one of those that people will tout as like, oh, this is a big problem. It's like, no. Yeah. There's like maybe 50,000 people in the world still have that laptop. That's not a big deal.
Yeah, that's an Easter egg. That's not a concern. I feel that is something you've discovered, and you're like, oh, cool.
Which is another facet of fear and uncertainty and doubt, really, isn't it? It's like it's the same thing with all this Pegasus NSO spyware stuff. Same thing with Vault Typhoon. Unless you are somebody of actual note or reputation, public standing, you don't need to be bothered about this stuff because, no offense, but you're a relative nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody's
interested. Or you're part of like an apparatus that is going to annoy a government. I'm thinking about journalists that might not necessarily be celebrities, but that are doing enough digging to get on radars of places. And then, how are you going to report the news, for example, in a place like Myanmar and not worry about your personal safety if they're going after the internet sovereignty and VPN usage of just the rank and file? So imagine that. Of course, they're probably pointing the equivalent of a Pegasus at your digital fingerprint and hoping for the worst. The best for them, but the worst for you. So yeah, it's not, thinking about it, there's a lot harder set of questions I'm going to need to ask my poor mother if she really does genuinely need dark web monitoring. We need to have a chat over some browsing.
What have you been browsing? Mother?
That's what I'm saying, right? Or like, what are you purchasing? Like, are those boxes downstairs aren't just unopened china? Apparently, they're arms and weapons that my mother's then sending to Canada at that point, right?
Speaking of things bought from China, did you hear about that massive fire at the Temu warehouse the other week?
Really?
It's about $48 worth of damage.
I hate you. I knew something. I knew something was going on. Yeah. Oh God. I mean, when you have the biggest clothes dealer in the world doesn't own any clothes. Shout out. Exactly. So, but they figured it out. I'm here. I'm not being a hater. Right. In that regard. So we tied that one off. I think time to go into a little bit of a deeper dive on a couple of stories here, and then we're going to round out with our cyber predictions for 2025, our hot takes. What the heck's going to happen? My story.
Doing predictions. I thought we were doing resolutions.
Oh, okay. We can do resolutions. Let's switch it.
You've not prepared for that segment.
No, listen. I resolve not to fall.
Mr. Pre-production now wins.
Not to fall prey to what I predict is going to happen. I can make it work. I can make it work. All right. So in terms of the deeper dive story, though, I think we'll find something, a link to attach, I think, to say, hey, what the hell happened with net neutrality? But sadly,
Ajit Wikipedia page.
Oh man, just redirect there and then somehow find a way to make him pay for Wikipedia this year so we can all use it. I that's using hacking for good, not evil. But just use the crypto account that he funds all the OnlyFans activity that he undoubtedly funds himself. But anyway, we have. Is
that true, or are we into a slander libel sort of scenario?
1,000%. Listen, I would bet money that it's absolutely true. All right, there was one OnlyFans lady that made $47 million last year. $7 million of it is from one anonymous source. I'm not saying it's not Ajit Pai. That's all I'm saying. So, hey, now we have a pretty landmark case where, as is a fallout and the true fallout from recent political events, not naming names, but when you stock a lot of judges in many key situations, you end up doing weird, dumb shit like this. I definitely have a bias on which side of this I fall on. But net neutrality was struck down, and essentially it was a contention of the FCC to say, hey, internet service providers are very powerful. They are powerful in ways that could harm the common consumer. So we're going to have to look at them and treat them like utility companies, which anybody who uses electricity in the United States or gas or any sort of thing that you need from a power company, you're stuck with who you have in your area And without regulation, even with regulation, they can take you out behind the woodshed and beat you up for money. But without it, it would be far worse. So one of the few times I can look at a government ruling or an agency ruling and go, that really made a lot of sense. FCC a little while ago said, hey, too much power. You're going to have to act in certain ways. That was struck down this week, I believe, if not early last or late last week. But we have a situation where the fallout from the crumbling of net neutrality is giving me legitimate fear, uncertainty, and doubt. This is not the FUD that we just railed against salespeople using to hawk some goods. But I'm just concerned that now this opens the door to a set of corporate beings that have incentives and drivers that are absolutely not in line with the folks that they serve and could open the doorways to some really terrible, funny business in what has become, in my opinion, something as crucial. It's in the league of electricity and water, maybe not quite as primordial of a need for your average folk in the US, but it's up there, man. Right? Good, steady access to internet and non-throttled access to internet, which is one of the things that net neutrality was a bulwark against the internet service providing companies being able to pick and choose what traffic they wanted to accelerate or allow to be as fast as possible and what maybe potentially competitors' traffic. If you go back and look at the corporate profiles of a lot of your major ISPs, it reads, as many things do in this country, Kellogg owns how many brands, for example? I'm thinking back to, all of the food in our supermarket is provided by 5 companies. You don't know who an ISP is in bed with. You don't know who's their corporate daddy or mommy. That could lead to some pretty funny, weird things where you're paying for services that fundamentally need the internet, but because your ISP happens to be in the clutches of a competitor to that streaming service, lo and behold, your Hulu is going to get throttled. Or lo and behold, this opens the door to very scary things like, I don't like this section of the country having access to good, reliable internet anymore. So I think I'm going to do something about it. This is, I don't think I'm saying the sky is on fire unnecessarily. I don't like where this is headed. Robin, what's your take?
God, so many. I mean, I've got a Reuters article up on it, and fundamentally, this passage in here says net neutrality rules require internet service providers to treat internet data and users equally rather than restricting access, slowing speeds, or blocking content for certain users. The rules also forbid special arrangements in which ISPs give improved network speeds or access to favored users. So fundamentally, this is one of those things where it's the same kind of principle as all equal in the eyes of the law should be. I mean, I know I'm going to have people jumping all over this, being like, "Oh, but we're not all equal in the eyes of the law." It's like, yes, but the point is that in the spirit of it, we should be. The intent and the principle and how it's actually practiced are not the same thing. I can quote the principle, recognizing that in practice it doesn't necessarily work that way, but it's how it should.
It's an ideal.
So it's the ideal in that kind of regard, and that goes to, so we're now in a position where we could say, for example, I'm trying to think of streaming services and who has what. So Peacock's run by NBC. Isn't it AT&T mostly own HBO or something like that? Is it Time Warner? No,
it's
Time
Warner.
No, Time Warner is Optimum, right? So if you're an Optimum customer, you could end up with your Peacock basically not working because they want you to watch HBO and not Peacock, for example, right? So that's the kind of scenario that we could potentially be in there. Say, for instance, you are a Michigan State fan and you're absolutely fanatical about them. Say an alma mater of a big conference rival to Michigan State owns a telecoms company who happens to provide your
access
internet
to Michigan
services, so they can just massively throttle Michigan State games. They can tank your support. The only people who will be able to see the games or have an interest in it are the people who are actually able to go. That can really tank viewership of certain games, and that could affect the way that they potentially play, on the basis that no potential players are going to want to go to the college where they can't get the time
Exposure.
on time on the TV and exposure, so they actually get a good pick in the draft and get to showcase their skills.
And now money. That was introduced this past year
Yes.
in the college game, right? The NIL rules where you can actually start paying these players as they should, in my opinion. But think about that. Why would you go if you can't be guaranteed that you're going to get that sort of shine on a national stage?
So it's just massive favoritism. And what really I think is will poke holes in a lot of people's arguments about who has what agendas is, the Democrats, for example, in bed with big business, and it's all about control and blah 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 and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, yes, Soros. And this is one of those measures that has been specifically designed to benefit the average person over the
big business.
Big business. And all that's going to happen now with this getting struck down, I can guarantee the incoming administration is not going to have any interest in resurrecting this. So it will get significantly. I don't want to be fair and say D and out. This has the potential to get significantly worse over the next 4, 6, 8 years, because it will take some time to reinstate. And if the party lines flip again in the White House in 4 years' time,
you're going to get a patchwork of craziness, which is where, even anti-monopolists, I believe, like yourself and myself, can see the need when you have a situation like the light companies used to have in this country way back in the day. You had tons of small competitors. There's no standardization. There's no safety. So you could take a look at those pictures from old-timey United States situations, and you could see all the lines crossing the streets, and it looked like an absolute spider web mess. That is understandable, and same for the internet here, right? It takes a lot of capital to run the lines, to ensure that you have good, steady tech that's providing the best type of service that you can. So there are some allowances for monopolistic behavior just by nature of the service that you're providing. However, there needs to be a check and balance on letting that run away. I think it's then going to start going. It can, if unchecked, can go for 4, 5, 6, 8 years, where you have, potentially. What if an ISP prefers one security solution provider to another, and you happen to be a customer of the odd company left out?
Yeah.
So what does this allow for? If you're not a CrowdStrike customer, then you're shit in a certain region. Potentially, if CrowdStrike is able to strike a deal with a local ISP and get their service or their traffic prioritized, or potentially not just strike a deal, meaning potentially also pay for it. Right? Then it becomes a pay-to-play sort of situation versus at least there's certain types of level playing field. You could, of course, always go out and get super duper wild internet if you wanted to have redundant stuff. If you wanted to pay extra money to have stuff run, you could theoretically, but that's on you. But however, the floor should be allowable and reliable for everyone in this country. This is what this decision puts into danger.
It's like a Maslow's hierarchy of sort of technological needs, where at the very, very fundamental level, it's equal usable access to information. And that's what I mean. The joke meme is that you take Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and on the very, very bottom tier of it, you put Wi-Fi, don't you?
Listen, you're not that off, because what happens when public library systems can't pay internet service providers to get decent, reliable internet, and all the folks that are relying on that to supplement education, to explore, to maybe get themselves out of terrible situations? It's near and dear to my heart, because I always say that it wasn't Wi-Fi back in my day, but it was the library card was a passport, Robin. It was absolutely a passport. I remember fondly, and I still drive by there when I go visit the city, because that was the thing that got me a doctorate, is what I say. The love and the access to information and the love for books. What if that's not as reliable now, internet-wise, right? And are you going to then start seeing disparities in ability based on socioeconomic status, which you already see, but
Yeah.
it's worse.
And that's the crux of it. It basically goes to good service now only is available to those who can pay, and
Yeah.
the price is set by
A disproportionately powerful entity in the equation.
And that's the other aspect of it as well. It's not one of those, because people could well say to me, oh well, supply and demand, market economics, supply and demand, the price is set by the market. No, it's a highly elastic good, right? In other words, it's supply of the internet is very loosely constrained, right? It is not a finite good. There is not scarcity of the internet.
Yep.
There's only so much bandwidth that goes around, but that can be expanded quite readily. That typical supply and demand thing does not apply quite as neatly with something like internet access.
And especially when there's already monopoly players that have been established, that were established and allowed to flourish under the auspices of a playing field leveling set of regulations, which are now kaput.
And I would be willing to bet the people who ultimately end up most hard hit by this will end up blaming the very people who are trying to put net neutrality in the first place.
Sure. Yep. 100%.
Because it's just the easy group to blame.
Mm-hmm. So
anyway, right.
What do we got? What do you got for us?
I was gonna say let's move on. So story from Bleeping Computer. This is a very interesting development on a story that we looked at the other day. The other week, new details reveal how hackers hijacked 35 Google Chrome extensions. This is fascinating how this was done. So the other week, we talked about a story whereby a phishing campaign targeting Chrome browser extensions had led to the compromise of multiple extensions and had culminated in a data theft from a data loss prevention company, which is a hilarious irony, really, not for the people whose data was stolen, but it's quite ironic.
Yeah.
Details have come out as to how this was actually done, and this was really clever. I have to give credit to whoever did this. So, sophisticated phishing campaign, phishing email comes from an address that looks like something that it could be associated with Google and the Google Play Store. So there was supportchromestore.com, there was 4extensions.com, there was chrome4extension.com, the domains that these emails came from. And this is an email that kind of waffles on about not allowing extensions with misleading or poorly formatted, non-descriptive, irrelevant, excessive, or inappropriate metadata, blah, 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 blah. Basically just crap that you're going to go, yeah, whatever. And asks you to log in, go to policy button to understand what rules you have allegedly violated. And then you are taken to a legitimate Chrome login page, right? So the premise of this is that Google are emailing you saying that your extension is violating rules and you need to log in. So you do log into Google. And what it does is takes you through to something called the privacy policy extension, which is the malicious extension, and asks you to grant a bunch of permissions that most people will not understand what this is actually doing. Verbiage said when you allow this access, privacy policy extension will be able to see, edit, update, publish your Chrome web store extensions, themes, apps, and licenses that you have access to, which loosely translates to will have unfettered access to all of your other extensions. All of your other extensions that potentially contain a lot of sensitive data. Now, again, the important thing to remember here is that the attackers have not needed to steal your password. They have not needed you to compromise your multi-factor authentication. They have utilized Google's open authentication, so their broad authentication framework, to coerce you into allowing that extension to have far more permissions than it should, so that it can steal all the data from all of your other extensions.
Subtle. It was very subtle,
very
Robin,
subtle.
I think is where you're going.
Yeah. And I mean, it is underhanded, but it's not done anything that's outright deceptive from the logging in perspective or anything like that. It's not doing the de facto thing or the favored tactic at the moment, which is compromising identities, which is basically hijacking your login account. What it's doing is allowing or is coercing you into giving it all the access it needs and then assuming that you'll never really bat an eyelid at it again, and this caught out a lot of people, including individuals who work at a cybersecurity firm. This, I think, the most egregious bit about this is Google's lack of picking this up in allowing it on the Chrome store. This is a Google issue.
Yeah, it's a process. I think it's a process issue on Google's side. I'd want to see a good follow-up afterwards, even if it takes them a little time. I'm not here for half measures in 10 seconds. Surprising, right? You work with me. Usually I'm go, go, go. But I'd rather them take a beat, come back and go, yeah, we've analyzed how the hell this happened. We're smarter for it. We've hardened our processes and procedures, and we put in some checks and balances to make sure that this, because you can't put this on, like you said, Robin, you can't put this on the users. You truly, I don't think you can, because there's nothing that we, and we're in this business, there's nothing that we can hook onto and say, okay, here, right? That we would educate users and say, you see this happening, alarm bell. Potentially, it necessitates a broader view of the process that then I think we could both say we're not talking to like your normal end user. At that point, we're talking to more technically savvy folks, and the training is going to be different for them anyway. So it's not like we can jump on and say, oh, wait a second, this, and this. As you say with the education stuff that you do in your 9 to 5, you're always great with coming out and saying, okay, I described the attack. Here's how I would have seen it, or here's how you can avoid it. I struggled doing that when dissecting this story, and that's where I think that's kind of what told me why you picked it, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's a few bits of anti-phishing advice or anti-credential theft advice here that will not work in this scenario, and there's a few bits that do. So by all means, go click on the article link that we put in the show notes here, see it for yourself. The domain that the emails are being sent for are not legitimate Google domains. That said, you will only really know that if you have made concerted effort to keep up with this kind of thing, like what are legitimate domains, what are domains in the first place, where is the email coming from, is this actually affiliated with Google? That's your first chance to spot that this isn't right. The other one is the formatting is, the spelling, punctuation, grammar, and everything like that in here is really good, and that's likely a product of large language models fixing all of that sort of stuff for those cyber criminals who are not native English speakers. But the formatting is a bit off. It's not quite what I would expect from a legitimate Google communication. But then, and in the recipient's web client here, there is a warning sender could not be verified. Not everybody has that kind of warning banner, so that's not something that we can say blanket always look out for that. If you have it, great, pay attention to it. If you don't, you can't use what you don't have. But then after that, we can't say to you something like, oh, we'll check whether the login page looks right, check whether the URL there looks right, because you have actually been sent to sign into Google. The only other thing that you've got here to work on is understanding what permissions you should and shouldn't give.
Sure.
Extensions that you do or don't know what they are. And the basic premise there should be never give more permissions than the thing needs to be able to do its job. And sometimes, I would say this, sometimes it will turn out, I err on the side of caution and say I deny permissions to things when they ask for it that I'm not comfortable with. When it's like asking for my location all the time, I'm saying like, no, don't do that, because I don't want the app to know where I am every single minute of every single day. It's like allow only when using. I'm an iPhone user, so I get that option. If it turns out that app will not work properly if it doesn't have my location all the time, then fine. Later on, I'll go and I will change the setting, and I'll say, yeah, look, you can see always where I am. It's good for that kind of thing. Is good for banking apps because it'll then know if you are in the general location of where your card activity is, for example. But when it's like your, I don't know, third-party calculator app, there's no reason that needs to know where you are at all times. Similar to a Chrome extension that you've just been asked to install. Do not give that unfettered access. In fact, look into it and work out what that extension actually is in the first place. But then after that, you've got no real, until shit starts hitting the fan, you've got no indication as to what has gone wrong. At least when you're in a position where your credentials have been stolen, you might be getting multi-factor authentication prompts that you haven't triggered yourself, at which point you know, oh, well, my password's been stolen. But other than that, you've got nothing here. They just have unfettered access to all the data in all of your extensions that you have downloaded or that you have active. So this is difficult.
It's tough.
It's not impossible, but it's quite underhanded.
So I think we're at the point. Yeah, it's not right in terms of, you know, my cyber resolution is to do exactly what you said, not provide unfettered access to extensions. Boom, done. We're out of here. No, I'll say the cyber resolutions for 2025, things that we want to shore up, do better. I'm gonna use a bit more. It's something I'm picking up from you. There's an email address that I have that's kind of a throwaway. I think I'm going to set up more throwaway email accounts and then try to sign up for certain things with certain email accounts.
Yeah.
We'll see. Right. And also another one that I like is when you're signing up for stuff and they're necessitating that you put in your information. As your middle name, you put in the service that you're signing up for.
I've always liked that.
Because then, you know, you put those two in my head, and I think I'm going to give them a good go. Because I'm noticing there was a lull, at least for me, with my profile over the last couple of years, and now it's shooting up. I don't know if it's some dad thing that I signed up for or some Coupa. I don't know what it was, but I feel like I'm getting assailed by unsolicited offers of a lot of different stuff, right? Nothing weird or untoward, right? Because then it's what am I searching? But it's really just random things, and one of them got a hold of my phone number. So I think I'm going to be a little bit more diligent about at least tracking, so then I can Wrath of Khan it on the right parties that are just selling my shit.
Yeah. No, that's some good stuff. I mean, anything that what about things that you already do that you would encourage others to pick up and try and embed as a habit?
I like using Signal for communications with family members. I've gotten them on that bandwagon, and I think, you know, and thankfully it's funny. I'm glad that I picked Signal instead of Telegram back when they were both neck and neck, you know, for reasons that all you have to do is look up why that is. Although Telegram is oddly profitable, is the last thing that I saw, even in the face of its legal woes. But I think having a secure comms channel for family, and also having a family password. I do that in the age of we're going to be releasing the interview with our good friend Jose. He brought up he's thinking deepfakes are going to go bananas in 25 and 26. So I think having some sort of password that is unrelated, as much as it can be, is unrelated to your cyber profile. It has to be something that somebody has to know about you, or that you've decided upon out of band, not shared. And if you share it, use Signal, for God's sakes. But having those two layers is something that I feel it's not gonna produce, you know, results. Hopefully, right? We're not gonna need it. You don't ever want to have to use it. And I think probably the latest one that I'll tag onto that. I am an absolute tyrant about people posting photos of my daughter on social. This led to not quite a fist fight, because I'd lose, right? My sister would beat me up. But this led to me and my sister really arguing because when she was born, right, she took a photo and posted it, and my wife got the notification, and we were still in the hospital. We're like, what the shit? Because this is a conversation my wife and I had prior, and said we're for as long as we can. It's not something that you can stave off forever, because, you know, cyberpunk is now. But as long as you can, keep that off. If you're gonna post, cool, put a clown face on the kid. If you're gonna, you know, if it's something that you really need, like, hey, I'm a good parent, for whatever reason, you got to post something, right? Like, contrary to popular belief, I love my kid, but at least, you know, shroud their identity. Don't allow, and if you can go a step further, don't be telling us about what the hell you and your kid are up to, what the routines are, what they love to do, what they're into. I hate to be this way. I know fully well that y'all are indulging me when I go into that at work, right? So I try to keep it short, right? Because ain't nobody that interested like myself, number one. But number two, then listen, I'm under no pretense. I love all of you, but I know that I'm that interested, and that's about it. My wife too. But also on a real note, though, the corollary there is that can be then used to reach out or maybe bamboozle the kid down the road. That's the last thing you want to be able to allow. This is not tinfoil hat. This is not fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There is a very real component of maintaining strict cyber hygiene, especially for young folks, as long as you can. So that's something I suggest folks to look into. And if they have questions on how, reach out.
This is very much one of those things that I think it hits that what is it, the everything everywhere all at once kind of thing, which was like that was touted when it came out as kind of like parental guilt porn kind of thing. It was like all of these things that I've been doing that I've never really realized that are quite damaging, because I've always told my kid, don't be so soft or sensitive about whatever. And it's just a genuine grievance that the kid has. This is an elder millennial Gen X thing that I think has happened, that the younger generations now have been like, would you friggin' stop posting me online like all the time? I can always tell. And I mean, I'm not saying that it's elder millennials and X's that do this as well. Like I think boomers are, the grandparents are pretty bad for it as well, from the point of view of like, I can always tell when someone, on social media or something like that, when somebody is a raving hypocrite, when they don't have their face in the profile photos, but they have their grandchildren or children plastered all over it. Like, oh, you are paranoid about your privacy and your personal data, but you have no problem exposing your nearest and dearest to it. Your opinion now, in my mind, doesn't matter. Just get out. Just leave the conversation.
And also, Robin, it's impractical, because I'll even say, like, let's devil's advocate that for a second. Although I do agree 100%. I'm just thinking, if you're that enthralled or enamored with protecting yourself online, then what the shit are you doing by posting avenues of exposure of yourself for everyone to see? It's not only hypocritical, which I 100% agree that it is, but it's also impractical.
The logical fallacy.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So yes, don't be posting the kids. And have that family password. Don't overcomplicate that family password either. Make that an in-joke, or something that you all recognize as, something that you just say. It's the best idea for that. I've got a few here, hitting on one that you have. I think the extra email address is always, it's one of my favorite, because as I said last week, email is one of those things, especially now as multiple services are going passwordless, and we no longer use the password. We send a code to your email address or to your phone number. As that kind of behavior proliferates, that email address becomes a more concentrated source of identity compromising potential, and that makes it progressively bigger and bigger target for cyber attackers. So they will just continuously start going after your email now, because it's the big old janitor's keychain with the master key on it. It can get into pretty much everything. It holds all the keys for the password resets as well, because companies should not store passwords in plain text in an unencrypted form. Whenever you reset your password, you get a link, and then you have to go to your email, and you have to do it that way, because that's a time limited one-time token. Now, if somebody else can get that, they can trigger your password resets, they can steal all of your other accounts that are associated with it. So my advice there is, have those multiple email accounts. Use what was your main one that has been around for a long time, that has no doubt ended up on phishers lists, because here's another one. The longer an email address is around, the likelihood of that ending up receiving phishing increases progressively up to 100%, and it will never go down, because it will always be out there and exposed. Transform that one into your burner, create a new clean one. That your most important affairs go on. Maybe even make another one that your intermediate sort of stuff goes on that you're not all that sort of bothered about. Put them on different platforms as well. Have one be an Outlook, have another be a Gmail, have another be an iCloud, so that you can also split that. So you're not confusing one and the other, and then you're not, cross-pollinating the purposes of those email addresses. Make sure that you split them out and spread your risk.
Mm-hmm.
And do not give out the email address that has all the most sensitive stuff on it. That is not your correspondence email. That is your purely for accessing those important
foundational.
files.
Yeah.
I think a password audit is a good one. And again, this is all of this stuff is not things that you have to do all in one go as some Herculean, oh, I'm overwhelmed by this, can't be bothered kind of task. Like, spread this out a little bit. Use January. Like, January's cold. Nobody goes out anyway, and everybody wants to be most people want to be thrifty after Christmas because the credit card bills are fat. So use some of this miserable January time to change 5 passwords at a time. Go into your password manager on your phone, be it Apple's passwords app or whatever Google uses, or if you use LastPass, something like that. Pay attention to those warnings that say this password was found in a breach. You should maybe change it.
Or it's weak.
Or it's weak, yeah. Improve that. Do 5 at a time. Find any of those accounts for which you have a safe password that you're like, I don't even use that account anymore. Go there, go to the site, delete the account. You don't want identities hanging out there that aren't used anymore, that can be compromised and used as a pivot point to something else more important. Turn on your MFA.
That's a good one.
On everything that you care about. Again, you don't have to do everything all in one go. Just do a few at a time. The same concept goes for the extra email addresses as well. You will no doubt need to migrate email addresses over from your old one. You'll need to change the details on each service that you want to use. 5 at a time. Don't overcook it. Don't overburden yourself. Just get through it gradually. Make a list and just knock it off. 5 every couple of days, or 5. Just take a Sunday afternoon. Do 10 on a Sunday afternoon or something like that. You mentioned about your phone number being out there, and some people might think that this is absolutely useless advice and that the respective agency is toothless, but put your number on the do not call registry, the Federal Trade Commission's do not call registry, because that tells telemarketers you're not allowed to call this number. And if they do, they're at risk of fines, and you can sue them privately for harassment if they do keep calling you when you're on the do not call registry. Again, some people might think that that's a completely pointless kind of thing, but it takes 5 minutes to do, and the benefit of it, when it does work, far outweighs the cost of spending 5 minutes to do something that you might consider completely ineffective. That's a really, really good trade-off. 5 minutes of the time. If it does work, it provides you massive benefit. If it doesn't, so you've spent 5 minutes of your time doing something that was ineffective. 1, cry me a river. 2, tell me about all of that time that you've been binge watching your latest Netflix series.
True. I like it. I'm going to do that actually after.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that after. I hadn't thought of it because, again, I'm in that camp, but the risk reward is pretty disproportionate in our favor. So good looks, Robin.
It takes a month to kick in. You have to feed all the data in, but after that month, you should hopefully, if you do receive high volume of, you've been pre-approved for a $70,000 business loan, despite the fact that you don't actually have a business. Go fuck yourselves. Yeah, those kinds of calls should drastically drop off. I really hope. I've got a few more days before my month is up, and then I'm going to start answering those calls and saying you're committing a federal offense. Stop calling.
With your accent too, that's going to be super scarier, I think. I'm just biased.
Do you know what? I knew this very early on, but I've been here 10 years. I do find the accent, and especially since it's not waned, I do find it so useful in just for credibility's sake. I think it is. 100%. And like telling people off and saying this is unacceptable. This isn't good enough. Or my personal favorite, whenever it's customer representatives with whom and I try not to be a dick when I'm on with like customer support or anything like that, because I recognize at the end of the day they're just people and they are bound by certain processes. But whenever I'm not getting anywhere with the issue, it's okay. I appreciate that this is not personally your fault, right? I don't hold any ill will to you. The company is screwed up, and I may rate at the company. I apologize that that you might be on the receiving end of something, of an irritated customer, and the amount of cooperation that you get out of simply doing something like that, just saying, look, I appreciate that it's not personally your fault, right? And it's just amazing. You can get so much done with that rather than just being an outright dick over the phone and lambasting somebody who's just doing their job.
100%. Just like a little bit of empathy, and suddenly they're doing things that they can do but don't offer all the time.
And giving them the outset. So if it's a position where they don't have the authority to do it, it's like, okay, I understand that you can't do this. You don't have the authority. Is there anyone that you can pass me on to who does have the appropriate authority to do it? Because then you give them permission to make it not their problem anymore.
100%.
If you do work in customer support and call centers or anything like that, then there's anything about that doesn't hit right, maybe because it affects your numbers. If actually you do have to get to your supervisor or something, then let us know, because I'm actually genuinely really interested about that.
Yeah,
because I don't interact. I never know. Final one. Give you credit check quickly, and sign up for some free credit monitoring with one of the big agencies. Find something that gets you. They can get you also credit locks, or even maybe go through your apps as well, your banking apps, and see which ones have the functionality to put freezes on your card if you ever need to. And
better to prepare.
Yeah. Well, if you know where all of those things are, the minute that shit hits the fan, you can react much quicker than if you have to go ferreting around trying to look for functionality that you may or may not know exists already. But those are my cyber resolutions. Those spur any additional thoughts of extra things that people should do in your mind, or are we?
I think that
where
the
we should close
monitoring.
off?
No, the monitoring I think is a really good one. It's something you should. I periodically check mine. That is one thing that I'm very paranoid about, because I mean it just, the money's hard to earn. I don't want it even temporarily stolen. And in a lot of situations, it very well, unless you're actively engaged in something where like the pig butchering scams. I refuse to call them anything else. Unless you're handing your money out that way. Yeah, I know. There's
no. I want to get on my soapbox about that. Why are we wasting cycles? And I will fight people who want to have an argument with me on this one. Why are we wasting cycles talking about changing pig butchering, the verbiage around that, so people's feelings aren't hurt, when we could be putting the energy into actually stopping these kinds of things and raising the awareness of them, as opposed to, and don't get me wrong, I understand the value of semantics, but this is one of those things where the number of conversations that are going to be had about this are a massive waste of time.
There's other things where I could see the semantics being a bit more nuanced, and I could see why you'd make a change, especially in cyber. There's a couple of different phrases that I didn't fight nearly as much, because I see that. I see why we're switching over from this to that. But
I mean, one of the counter arguments that I've seen as well is like the actual scammers themselves use the term pig butchering, and that's one of the arguments like for changing it. It's like, oh, this is disgusting language. It's like, yes, but that gives you a very, very good insight as to how these cyber criminals see you.
Exactly.
Yes, it is dehumanizing. That's the whole point. Recognize that these people are shit, and that they do not value you, and then maybe use that as a motivator to say, hang on a minute, is somebody seeing me as just an object out of which they can get money?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
So
monitoring. Bringing it back to I think periodically taking a look and taking an inventory is always a good thing. I might be a little bit obsessive. I just want to make sure that there's not charges being put on any of the cards for the household in some weird ways. And I like that.
I remember seeing a little while ago something that said, what's a commonality, financial commonality between people with very little money and people with enormous amounts of money that like the middle class just don't quite get. And somebody said, checking your credit is the most middle class thing going. The very rich don't check their credit because they know that it's awesome because they've got shitloads of money, and the very poor don't check their credit because they know that it's shit and they're never going to get credit anyway. So it's just that right in the middle. It's like I must check this. I must make sure it's good because I want to be able to borrow.
Exactly. You know, I don't want it to fall off a cliff and then need it or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's safety net, isn't it? Not one you want to use, but it's that. Right. Well, with that, I think we shall close off our. Is it our first episode of 25? I think it is.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank you, Robin, for officially welcoming me to the middle class. Thank you. I made it.
I don't have that authority. That is not me. You make that determination yourself.
Damn, the accent was having me think that this is a fiction. Come on.
I bestow upon you.
Thank you. Made it. First generation immigrant made it. All right.
Oh god. Keep an eye out next week. We've got an interview with Jose Toledo. Very rock star of a guy, cybersecurity educator and pen tester.
Yes.
And yeah, just general all round awesome dude. That's coming up next week. So out sometime around the 13th, 14th, we will have that. And yeah, tune in. If you're not already subscribed to the channel and you've enjoyed this, please do give us a follow on Spotify, because the listener numbers there are garbage. And if there's anything that has piqued your interest or sparked an opinion that you might have in terms of what we talked about this episode, it might be, should we or should we not still keep using the term pig butchering? Is net neutrality something that we should or shouldn't have? Please do drop it down in the comments. We'd be interested to know your thoughts. And equally, if you're already a subscriber and you're not commenting in or doing the likes and things like that, please do, because it helps the channel grow. I really don't want to be in the position of begging, but if you're already part of the community, please engage, because we've been doing this nearly a year now. I think the first episode we ever did was like last February.
Just about, yeah. I think it was, right around. Yep.
Yeah, it's slow. And we appreciate that the growth of a channel is an exponential thing. You do kind of crappy for a long time, and then suddenly it's like, holy shit, where did this come from? But I'm impatient.
I don't want to have to show leg if I don't have to. So please. Let's
CyberDudes podcast now available on YouTube, Spotify,
After Dark,
OnlyFans.
OnlyFans. There you go. Hey, I saw that 47 million, and I said, wait a second, I'm doing something wrong.
I want a slice of that cheese.
Yeah.
Okay, right. That's everything we have for today. We'll see you again next week with an interview.
Adios.
Stay cyber safe. Bye bye.